Happy Thursday, everyone. I hope you're doing well and have had a wonderful week to this point. It's about to get better as we get to spend the next half hour or so together tasting this lovely little number. So who is with us? Chime in one and all and let me know who is here. David, hello. Good evening. Thank you. Matthew, hello, sir. Cheers. Great to have you with us. Isabel, how are you? So excited you're with us this evening. And the McCartys are here, and Allison Laitman's here, and Kathy's with us, with Trisha and Andy. Awesome. A lot of the returning favorites. Jan's here. Hey, Jan, how are you? What did you guys make for dinner tonight? What did Mr. Bobby make for dinner tonight? I'm sure I'll see the picture later, but curious. Tony and Brenda. Susan's here. Kathy, happy birthday to you. A big 6-0, I think, a big special year. And you had some wonderful wines from what it looked like. Hopefully we'll have that again tonight. Kristen, good evening. And Peg, welcome. Cool. All right. As people are venturing forward, let me make a comment about what's coming up in the next several weeks, months, with the holiday season with regard to this wonderful tasting group. Hey, Tran, and the Swanbergs are here, and Deborah Odom is with us. So we will not have a tasting group on Thursday, Thanksgiving, which will be next week. So we will pause for that particular Thursday. And the way the holidays fall this year, Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve are also on Thursdays. And so we will pause from them as well. Randall's here. Hey, man. And Charlie. And the Kestenbaums are with us. So glad to see you too. And Stephen, hello. And Nicole, I'm sure, is behind or with you there. So we'll be closed those Thursdays. But the cool thing about what Tony and Julie have done is that they have sourced wines for the rest of this year and all the way through January. And we're going to take a week-long break in January as well. So the first full week in January will be closed here at Field Maine to give everybody a break. And so if you want to participate in the wines, especially in January, and have the wherewithal to be able to pick some up in between sort of the holidays in December, or even right now if you wish to, we have all of them available. So I think Julie's putting them online now this evening or tomorrow morning, and so we'll have the opportunity to make available a whole series of wines for the next several weeks. And Dana brought her dad, I think it was, in with her this evening. I'm sorry I missed that note quickly as I was chatting. And Randall, thank you very much for the permission there and the note about deserving the break. We are looking forward to just taking a moment for everybody to catch their collective breath. Jan, good evening to you too. Welcome. All right. What do you say, folks? We're going to do a little red number tonight. For those of you that are not with the wine, here's what it looks like. A red number. What do you think? Yeah, I guess Kathy, absolutely. One-stop shopping. Happily so. For those of you that are coming out to pick up some Thanksgiving meals that are a heat and eat option, we have a few of those left, I think. And those are available, I think, through Monday, so that we can prepare and package them for pickup on Wednesday. And you can certainly pick up wines if you're venturing our way for that. Or if you're joining us throughout this holiday weekend, we will have those wines available. We're making some progress too by way of the cabanas. They should be open at some point in December. We were hoping to be early December, and so we're kind of on target. We got delayed a little bit with the rains and some of the weather, but we're catching up now. Hello to Chris and the Shirleys that are here, and I agree, Kathy. This is it's a lovely color. So what are we talking about, folks? Is this clear? Is it hazy? Pale, medium, deep color? Would you call it garnet? Would you call it ruby? Would you call it purple? Some variation of those colors? What's your descriptor for this wine? And what do we know about this wine already just from its appearance? And the Swanbergs have picked up again and are back in the full swing of things. Last week they were opening it a little bit late. This week they're an hour early, so they're going to be ahead of us, or some of us at least. Purple, super deep garnet. So two different ends there, yes. Deep purple for many of you. That's interesting. I got more of a reddish cast, and I think that's an indication perhaps too of looking at the color of the wine on a white background. I'm seeing that deep purple in the middle, But on the outside rim for me, and maybe it's just the wood table that I'm on too, I get a more reddish cast. So some more of that sort of ruby coloration. Jan's calling it deep, dark garnet. We've got a deep, leggy purple coming from Tran. And the Swanbers are saying, is that a song? Yeah. Deep color, right? But talk to me about the intensity of this. Is this a wine that is super deep? I mean, I'm seeing deep from folks. Can you see through it? And I'm picking up, I can't read through it necessarily, but I don't know if you guys can get that through that wine if I angle it like that, but you can see the markings of words underneath or through the wine. The color is definitely darker, deep ruby kind of things, but the intensity is more moderate plus. It's got some power, but there seems to be a little bit of a clarity to it, an intensity to it that's not quite full deep. Like think about something like coffee where you couldn't see through. You can see through some of it, but then there's certain coffee that you can't see through at all. And I think this is in between those two. So the red element is ruby for some, garnet kind of for some, purple for some. So I think there are elements of each of those in this, especially at the core of the wine or in the middle of the wine. So sometimes it helps to splay your glass a little bit so that you get a little bit more surface area to look at. And the rim is more reddish, the interior is more purplish, and you can get kind of a little garnet element between the two layers there. But yeah, Susan's picking up on the edges. So that deepness would come from what? From a grape that has probably a thicker skin, right? Some kind of color extraction coming by way of the skin of the grape varietal. And so right off the bat, if we're thinking about that being an indicator of the wine and the varietal that we're going to deal with, we're not thinking about something like Gamay or like Pinot Noir. We are thinking about something like maybe Merlot, Cabernet, perhaps Petit Verdot, something on the other end of the spectrum. I remember a couple weeks ago we started really talking about the spectrum of wine, and I referenced a chart like this one that walks you through kind of a color variation. And it's kind of interesting in that regard. Can you see where the color matches up? Although this is a printed form, it's not up here, it's much more so down here. And in this realm, you're talking about what we were saying before, so sort of Merlot, Malbec, Cabernet Sauvignon, Petit Verdot, Mourvedre. That's just an indication of what we might be dealing with. Maybe not, but we're already well along our way in determining something about this wine. And again, we haven't even smelled it yet. And yeah, this is a link to this one is at winefolly.com, red wine boldness chart. So, all right, let's smell the wine. When you smell it, start to try to parse your smells into three general categories, right? Fruit, earth, and wood, just to have a way in which to reference things. Also reference your sheet if you have that with you too. And so work your way down the fruit components, and then there are sort of more mineral elements, there's vegetal notes, there's spice notes, and then other notes being principally things that you get by way of fermentation, some also from spice. But so let's work our way through that. Do you smell any fruit notes? Hey, Knobs. Knobs are here. Welcome, and yes, you're correct. Better late than never, and just getting started. Kathy's starting out plum, black cherry, blackberries, cardamom, young tobacco, graphite. Great descriptors, and a lot of fantastic fruit. And Rebecca's watching this evening. Hey, how are you? Anne McCarty is picking up on some oak. And Anne, what are you smelling by way of the oak? What kind of expression is there from the oak? Are you picking up, if you look at your sheet here, if you have this sheet, a lot of what you're going to find from oak is at the bottom there, but also right above it, kernel. And so you have cedar, medicinal, resinous, smoke, vanilla, tobacco. Kathy mentioned tobacco, right? So that's one indication of some oak. Perhaps you're going to get some almond, some coconut, some hazelnut, all walnut, maybe chocolate or coffee. Those are also descriptors that you might find. And going back up to the spice category, those are also elements that you're going to find thanks to wood. Raspberry, Chris is saying he smells some wet rock, so a mineral component to it. But the fruit is really prominent, isn't it? And it is, I think, all those descriptors, the blackberry, the plum, the raspberry. Very cool. What else, folks? So a lot of fruit, some earthen elements in the form of that rockiness, some stone, Jan, yeah, another way to say that rockiness for sure. Quite a bit of wood, some tobacco. Yeah. So a wine that has some intensity in by way of its color, a wine that has probably some oak to it, some form of oak aging, or at least some form of storage of that wine in oak, whether it was just principally kind of fermented in oak or just stored in oak. We'll kind of work on that. But it's a bigger wine with oak on it, and that's kind of neat. And so we're starting to think about that. Again, we're not then thinking about a really light, easygoing wine that would have a stainless steel production, for example. So already know all those things. So let's see if we can verify a number of those elements as we taste. Wow, interesting. That's an interesting wine. All right, do you find that wine after you've tasted it? Go down to the palate on this form, and let's talk a little bit about sweetness. There is none. It's a very dry wine, isn't it? Wow. The tannin and the acidity link up at the finish and run with some length. Yes, for sure. And I don't know if you're Susan, I don't know if you're using a power of suggestion. Happy Beaujolais Nouveau Day, but happy Beaujolais Nouveau Day to everyone as well. I don't think that's what we're dealing with here. Boy, I would be really wrong though. A lot more strawberry, tutti frutti, and a lot less tannin in a Beaujolais Nouveau. But wouldn't that have been amazing if Tony had the forethought to do that? Is the acidity high, medium, or low on this? And generally speaking, where do you perceive that acidity? So you get the acidity kind of up front usually, and then it starts to form around the mouth, you start to salivate. But it's the length of that determines kind of the power of that acidity. How long does that last to indicate the intensity of it, whether it is a kind of heavyweight, high level of acidity, a moderate kind of quality, medium level, or a kind of more subtle, perhaps more alkaline kind of presentation that's a lower level of acidity. Greg, welcome joining us for this evening. Thank you. It's a medium plus acidity. I agree with you, Susan. Monique's watching. Thank you so much. Yeah, more medium acid, medium plus acid. There's a length to it. And it's got some tannins. I agree with you, Jeff, 100%. This has got some medium plus tannins, doesn't it? When we were tasting a couple of weeks ago, I cannot remember which one we were tasting, but remember the acid and the tannin kind of linked together. It was 2 weeks ago, I imagine, and that wine kind of gave us a run for our money. Initially, what are you tasting? Are we picking up that fruit? It gave us a ton of fruit in the nose. Are you getting that on the palate? The raspberry, the blackberry, the plum. Medium plus tannins, and Kathy's noting the medium plus tannins. Jan's noting that this is definitely a food wine. And Jan, if I'm understanding you correctly, what you're saying by saying that is that this tannin and this acid make for this type of wine to be a little less enjoyable just kind of sipping at it. It just needs something to bond to, needs something to play off of, needs something to complement it and for it to complement. Susan's also noting a little bit of higher alcohol perhaps, high end of the medium side, so medium plus perhaps. Not as much, Kathy's noting too on the way of the fruit, but she's picking up some of that tobacco. Yeah, the secondary characteristics, and when I say secondary, primary usually designates fruit characteristics, as this is made from fruit, but the secondary elements, the things that are added to the fruit to make the wine, i.e. wood, fermentation elements, might come out secondarily. And they're more prominent on the palate than the fruit. The fruit seems suppressed, doesn't it, on the palate? Maybe overpowered a touch by the tannin and that acid. Susan's picking up some forest floor and herbs and tobacco. Yeah, I agree. This is I've used this word before, but kind of a sinewy wine. It's a wine that doesn't have a whole bunch of flesh to it. And maybe it needs a moment. We are 15 minutes in. It just needs a moment to open up. Swanberg's, Jeff, Adrian, what's this like for you, having had it open since 6? Is it more fruited on the palate at this point? Cacio Pepe, good call there, Krista. I'm glad John's been making a bunch of great food too. Yeah, that pepper element and sort of the creaminess, richness of that sauce would be fun. That cheese that's on it, I think all of that kind of would bond with the tannin in this and sort of soften that tannin. The tannic experience in this is prominent, and I'm bouncing all over with respect to what this might be. When we were looking at it, the appearance-wise, some noted a potentially high alcohol. The legs are forming in slower order. They're forming into tiers that are falling with moderate speed. So Kathy's snacking on this with some chocolate. Nice. Some of the chocolate character kind of matching with some of this wood element here. Probably, hopefully, a little bit darker chocolate. I think the sugar element here might not go quite as well with that tannin. But yeah, so where would we be in the world? Right off the bat, a gut feeling. Are we in an old world wine, a new world wine, and why? It's getting a lot more earthy for me. The second pour came about with a touch more of an earthiness, a little bit of a baby diaper, a poopiness. Dark chocolate with almonds, good call, Kathy, yes. New World is coming out from Kristen. I believe someone else flashed New World up there. I apologize, I missed that. And Chris is saying New World. New World from Kathy. So New World all around. Very cool, okay. So where in the New World and what varietals do you want to talk about? What's in the running? Referencing back, right? Mushroom and musty. That Matthew, I'm sorry to have christened the poopiness descriptor for you, but sometimes I get baby diaper on wines, and it's here in this one. And some of those interesting wines from the south of France. That was the wine we had tasted a couple weeks ago, the wine from Minervois, which had this tannin, the sinewness. It was the Carignan and the Sanso and Merlot. Chris is throwing out there Argentina or Paso Robles, South America from Kathy, Chile perhaps. All that earthiness, all that fruit on the nose, a little bit less so on the body and the palate. And then there's that secondary characteristics. All right, if we were in South America, we could certainly be talking about Chile. Someone threw out Malbec, and that would be Argentina too. Baby diaper is not necessarily akin to barnyard. They're there perhaps, and I couldn't tell you exactly what causes one aroma or the other. But this isn't barnyard. This isn't like, for me, this isn't horse manure and composted manure. This is, baby food out the other end. There's a lot of funk off of this, not as much fruit. Yeah, Krista, I agree 100%. John's finding the same with her. Malbec, question of blend. Potentially, we could be certainly seeing a blend. I'm not definitive on one or the other yet. Kristen's noting that off the aroma initially, she thought it might be Malbec. And yeah, I think the descriptors for Malbec might have helped there. So South America, Malbec, there's a chance. Perhaps we could be talking about like a Chilean Cabernet that has some tannin to it. It has the broadness of that tannin. Maybe a higher elevation Cabernet from Chile. That could be very interesting. And maybe there's a little bit of a blend here, a touch of Merlot blended into it. Do you remember when we had that Argentinian Cab Franc, and that had some of that. And David, yeah, I was just headed there. You prompted that exactly. I was headed the Cab Franc into Carmenere, potentially to maybe even just Cabernet again. The Carmenere, usually I get a lot more pyrazine element. I get a lot more bell pepper, green element off of the wine. Although there's a little bit of herbalness. The tannins here are substantial and mossy. They cling to the surface. They are ever present from sort of the second phase of the wine in the mouth to the finish and well past the finish. It's the tannin that is lingering here. And so this needs to be a varietal that can give you some of that tannin. Jan's thrown out a Cab blend. I think that's a possibility here. It's not so plush in the palate, and the acidity's there, and it's not as ripe. And so maybe we're talking about a higher elevation kind of, what you can find in Chile certainly is some higher elevation production of Cabernet. And when I say higher elevation, what you're getting is some of that sunshine ripeness by way of the daytime, but you're getting cool nights, you're getting mountain time fluctuation, you're getting a fresher quality in the wine, a higher acidity, generally speaking, than something that was grown on a valley floor, where it's more in a consistent zone of warmth without the fluctuation in temperature that you'd find at sort of a higher elevation. If you think about like sunshine in the afternoon on a mountaintop, beautiful and warm, but then at night it drops to be quite cool. And so we could be in that realm for sure, and that might help us explain some of that real ripeness on the palate, on the nose rather, and then the variation on the palate. And Jan's noting that it needs food. Yeah, we were all in agreement on that. And Kathy's throwing out Pais or Bonarda. I haven't had too many Paises, but I was thinking that as another option too. It can be really sinewy and tanniny. I mean, I've had a few Paises that, to be honest, I wouldn't want to drink necessarily on their own and would need food. Bonarda can give you the color and the power, and so we might be trying something like Bonarda here. And Bonarda is a varietal that has power and structure and tannin. I remember it being a little bit more black than red, and while we have some blackberry here, the raspberry element I don't recall as much. I could be wrong in that. Again, I've had a handful of Bonarda, so we could be talking about Bonarda. Bonarda is also oftentimes blended with a little Cabernet, perhaps. And we could be dealing with something like that. We served a Bonarda here for a while. It was much more plush. It had a lot more stuffing. It had a lot more flesh around the structure of the tannin and the acid. Pais, the 2 or 3 times I've tried a Pais, definitely has more of this sinewy sort of profile. A lot of muscle and bone, not a lot of flesh surrounding it. And that's the case here. That tannin, again, like, is anybody else getting that experience where it is just pretty persistent? Earthy. It's that baby diapers there for me still, and moving into sort of a hummus kind of planting soil potting mix element that a lot of the fruit that we smelled earlier on the nose has sort of blown off a little bit for me, from my glass here, and we're into the much more funky quality that a few of you have noted. So if we're in South America, Pais, Bonarda, Malbec, Cabernet, blend of some of the aforementioned varietals, Carmenere. It could be Carmenere if it was a riper one. Some of that tannin at the finish is a little bit underripe. Dirt leather and Bobby cigars. Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of that in this. That tannin at the very end of the experience of the taste is almost like chewing on the grape stem, so maybe something whole cluster element here. Jeff's noting that the bottle shape's not really a shape for Bonarda, and I do admit to just having also looked, prior even to your comment, at the bottle shape to see if it would give me any clues. It's a Bordeaux bottle shape, which isn't necessarily indicative one way or another, and yeah, most of the time you do find Bonarda coming out of that sort of burgundy shaped or the sloped side shape versus the structured kind of shoulders that would be on a Bordeaux bottle. But we could be talking about a Bonarda and Cabernet blend, and they probably would have elected to put it in something like this. So, any other thoughts? Are we all pretty much thinking that we are in South America for sure? One half thought I had initially, and then as we went into the sort of the first 10-15 minutes, was this could be potentially Frappato from Sicily. I'm not sure. I think that's still the correct choice, but that tannin and sort of the character of earthiness made me think for at least a second, would we be dealing with Sicily? And Sharon, we're glad you're back. Thank you for joining us. Yep. And Susan's watching. It is opening up a touch more, Shan. Yeah. Anybody getting any other elements from this that would indicate that we should go or consider something different, or more to the point perhaps, really helps to justify the thoughts that we've had thus far? Christina's watching this evening. Hey, Christina. So ruling out the world, Kathy's asking me if it's too much tannin for Frappato. And I think generally speaking, probably, yep. I've had a few that have a little bit more kind of that ample quality and some of that grip. So I'm more comfortable kind of walking away from that. The tannin and the initial presentation looked like potentially a Merlot of some sort. I also was thinking about Austria and a relatively cool element coming from Austria, but I'm not tasting that, so as a way to carry through. I thought Barbera for a half second, but the tannin I think is more aggressive than that. Dolcetto might give us some of this red-black fruit and some tannin for sure. And that earthiness may be coming through. And so I was in the old world and then wondering about the new. I wasn't thinking in any way, shape, or form that we were in the United States. And so that takes us back to South America. And so anybody comfortable kind of putting themselves on the block for a particular varietal in South America? Thank you, Jeff. Yes, you are. Cab Malbec blend. So coming probably principally from Argentina. I mean, that's a high elevation plateau, and you might get some of that quality from this. I think Thomas is watching for this. Thomas is joining us this evening too. Hey, Thomas, welcome aboard. As is Jeff. Yeah, I like the Cabernet Sauv, Cabernet Sauvignon blend kind of opportunity. And Susan just noted that. Kristen's noting that she likes Malbec. Jan saying Malbec from Argentina. Yeah, a Cabernet blend. Cabernet Bernarda might be interesting if we're kind of talking about. But a Cabernet blend I could be comfortable with. From, I'm going to say Chile more than Argentina. I think Chile has a little bit more of that coastal influence and the higher elevation sites. Robert's throwing out Chilean Malbec. Yep. Hi, Christine. No worries. We were tasting this little red number, and we're all of the mind generally that we're talking about something from South America. And so I think Cabernet blend from Chile, higher elevation site, gives us some of this tannin, relatively youthful. There is some variation on the rim here, but maybe 2017. David Pearson's on the board with the Cab Malbec blend. And coastal would cause more of some of that minerality, that stone quality, Jan, that we picked up earlier, that saltiness. You might pick up that. So, and Kathy's going all the way with Bernarda. Expedition Vintage is watching with us now. Hey, man. Hey, guys. Thanks for joining in. At any point, we're happy to have you here. We're dealing with this little red number that that is lovely. Peter, hey, man. Peter and I used to work together, and you love Mossy. Big hint in that. So, Peter, what would you call if you knew Mossy was in the wine? Yeah. Tannin is still very, very pronounced. It's young, like super young Cabernet, perhaps tannin. So, and you can get that from Malbec too with its youth. All right. What varietal is Baby Diaper? Peter's saying coastal is what he would have to think about from a mossy perspective. Yeah. You can get varietal elements more, it's not necessarily a descriptor of varietal for me. Generally, it's more about fermentation and how it's made and the cellar and that kind of element that you might pick up some of that. And place. Cocoa, if you're picking up cocoa, yeah, Malbec is a really good call then. I'm still in kind of a reddish fruit and that tannin experience with a lot of that earthy element that we've talked about and some of those. Yeah, I'm not picking up much more of that. So, all right. Kathy's on Bernarda. Quite a few of you are on sort of a Malbec blend, Cabernet blend, South American blend. Some of you are in Argentina, some of you are in Chile. Let's find out. Let's see where we're at. 2017 Cabernet blend. It's Bernarda. Santa Rosa, Mendoza, Argentina, 2018 from Zuccardi. And Zuccardi makes wines of kind of this piercing acidity and tannin and structure. I don't know that he's blended anything in this. I think he has done straight Bernarda. Bernarda is a rich violet color, exudes sensuous aromas of blueberry and blackberry. We're getting a lot more raspberry for us. Vivacious wine, not as vivacious at this point. Pure ripe fruit, soft in style, attractive finish. Gave more tannin than the description on the back end side of things. And I was looking for a little bit more of that vivacious and full, pure, ripe quality that this did not necessarily display on the palate as much as it did on the nose. Kathy, exactly, nice call, well done. I like the Bernarda call too, but as I said, I'm getting the tannin off of this that was a little bit different. It's also a good guess to think of Bernarda too, because we haven't done that, and I'm sure at this point we are venturing into territory where the varietals are going to become more and more relatively obscure or focused and pinpointed, not necessarily widely grown. And so that's kind of neat. Cool stuff. Sebastian Zuccardi is awesome. He ventured our way a couple of years back to do a wonderful dinner here, and one of the highlights certainly of my career, hanging out with him afterward in our office, just tasting Virginia wines and some of his own wines. And he's making micro parcel wines that are the same varietal, so Malbec typically sometimes, that is focused on really remarkable focused elements between the differences in soil, but not just soil at the surface, but soils at different layers. He's gone into incredible detail in his research about what's happening in the soils and making wines to reflect that. He's a thinker. He's a great thinker in his process, but he's also very much led by sort of this passionate intuition, which is beautiful. And the combination of the two makes for some very compelling wines, and wines that I would recommend anyone look for and try. And Chris, yeah, you're noting you have the Finca Canal Hugo left. Yeah, that wine was really beautiful. All of his wines are beautiful and distinctive. They're unique. And Kathy, you did a tasting with him at a wine shop. That's great. So if he ever comes back our way, post the COVID era, we will certainly visit with him again. But really cool production, and nice to know what he can do, and really a great opportunity to try his wine here tonight. Sorry I missed it, but I think if I had this wine, I would keep it for a little while and let it kind of age a touch, or give it a little bit more time in a decant before I jumped into it. I think it's a little bit tight at this point, so. But nevertheless enjoyable to try, and all the more so to do so with you. For those of you that joined a little bit late, I had mentioned earlier, we have a whole series of these wines, our Wines for Mystery, laid out for the next number of months. And just for your edification once again, and for those of you that have already heard this, I apologize. But for those that haven't, we'll be closed or not doing this tasting on Thanksgiving. So next week we'll take a break. And then we'll, by way of the holidays this year, Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve will fall on a Thursday, so we'll skip those two particular days. And we're also going to then skip the first, I should say, I think it's the second, but the first full week in January, we're going to close and skip that date. We have, though, wines for all the other dates, which are now online, and all the way through the end of January. So if you want to play in January in particular, that third week as we come back from our break, we won't have been open, so that week we won't have the availability for you to pick up wine. So if you can pick them up earlier, you can do so at any point up until when we close. And if you're just planning on being out here for the holidays and want to pick up a number of the wines just to have on hand, you can do that too. Or if you're going to plan on gifting a few of these to folks so they can join in on the chat, that would be wonderful too. But as we look toward next Thursday and Thanksgiving, for those of you that I don't get a chance to see before then, happy Thanksgiving to you. And for the rest of you who I might get a chance to, I look forward to seeing you here this way. Until then, be safe. Sit down with those that you care about, love and appreciate, and share a wine. And until we get to meet again, cheers, everyone. Thanks so much.